may not have known it, but last Friday was the 57th anniversary of the I Have a Dream speech given by Martin Luther King in Washington on August 28, 1963. And he closed out that speech with the famous words which so many people now, especially actually conservatives now, quote, which was, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And when this happens, all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. I wanted to start the first 5 quoting that to you today, just to give us a little bit of perspective about what the mission was of the Civil Rights Act, the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s, and all that America watched and the resulting civil rights legislation that passed. It was a tremendous time, ending segregation, ending the reign of terror of the Ku Klux Klan and the whole, Jim Crow laws, everything that was a horrible injustice in America. And I've often thought it would just be amazing to think about what would be Martin Luther King's reaction if you'd been able to tell him that day, on the day he gave the I Have a Dream speech 57 years ago, that 45 years later, there would be a black man elected president of the United States. I think that he and many who joined that movement at the time would have said, wow, this is great. There's actually going to be a black president in our future. We must have come a long way. Now I'm going to contrast it with Kenosha and LeBron James. And I will tell you something, this past Thursday on this show, I had actually pre-recorded the show the day before. So I didn't have a lot of information that came out about the details of the incident that occurred in Kenosha, Wisconsin, that resulted in the shooting of Jacob Blake. I didn't have that data, and several of you listeners emailed and said, "Hey, this wasn't right. You didn't notice it. You didn't acknowledge this. You should have said this." So I will say I didn't have all the facts, but now I do, and so I want to talk a little bit about what happened in Kenosha and really what it says about America and LeBron James. And if you don't know the term useful idiot, I don't like to call anyone an idiot, but it's a political expression used by communists when they brought their communist movement to Russia. It was the idea that you could convince people to surrender their freedom, to take the side of the communist Marxist movement that was going to crush liberty. And they would be so deluded by what they were being told, that they would go along with you, even though they were essentially surrendering their own liberty. They became useful idiots or pawns in the hands of the communists taking over that country. Now let's talk about what happened in Kenosha. There was a shooting by police officers in Kenosha of a black man named Jacob Blake. And what we knew of it last week, when I talked about last Wednesday, was that he was getting into his vehicle. There had been police called due to some kind of a distress call. Police they still have police there, which is great, who respond to calls from citizens for help. Police responded. First stories out were that Jacob Blake was a good guy hanging around the neighborhood, or had come over himself to try to break up a dispute between 2 women. This was not the case. Jacob Blake was the reason the police were called to the scene. He was the reason for the 911 call. And Jacob Blake was reported to the police, or the police came because a woman whom Jacob Blake had previously allegedly sexually assaulted in a most vile manner, had sexually assaulted her, had engaged in horrific conduct so bad that she got a temporary restraining order making him stay away. He still shows up at her house. She's alarmed. She calls the police. So Jacob Blake was not the innocent, sweet daddy of 3 who showed up to help solve the neighborhood dispute. He was himself the reason the police were there. Second was, so he shows up at this place, the woman who's gotten a temporary restraining order because she's previously been the recipient of his abuse. She's trying to get rid of him, wants him to go away, calls the police. Police come, and in the course of the interaction and so there's a warrant for his arrest. In addition, there's an outstanding warrant for his arrest for this conduct against this woman. So the police are there. They realize who he is. They're trying to get a hold of the situation. Jacob Blake is resisting arrest. When you have a warrant out for your arrest and the police are there saying, hey, we're here to arrest you, you aren't supposed to resist arrest. You can raise your defenses later. You can talk about whatever it is your defenses are, but you don't get to physically resist arrest. He actually had one of the police officers in that you had your arm wrapped around their head, a headlock. He had the police in that. Police had tased him twice, and it didn't stop him, which is not always, but sometimes a sign that you have drugs in your system that make you able to resist the tasing. I mean, tasing takes down big, strong people. It's intended to stop the most violent among us, and often does. He didn't faze him to be tased. And Jacob Blake, is heading toward the van when the police are saying, stop. They're trying to stop him, trying to place him under arrest. And he's headed toward the van door, reaching in. Now, when you're the police in that scene, you do not have to wait to find out whether or not Jacob Blake has a gun in his car, has a knife in his car, is going for a weapon. You don't have to find out. After you told him numerous times, stop, when you've seen he's got an officer in a headlock, when you tased him twice, when he's wrestled and out-wrestled police officers, you don't have to wait to see what he's going to grab out of his car and wait till he turns around with whatever weapon he had, gun or knife, and try to kill you. You don't have to do that. Jacob Blake, I am very sorry for any person to be shot, and I'm sorry for, certainly in his case, it sounds like he's going to be paralyzed from the waist down, but he brought on his own problems. That's the story of Jacob Blake. That's the real story I didn't have last Thursday because I recorded the show on Wednesday. Now I want to play for you what LeBron James had to say about this incident. I sent this clip to the very wonderful Matt, the producer, what LeBron James had to say about this incident involving Jacob Blake.
If you're sitting here telling me that there was no way to subdue that gentleman or detain him, or to just, before the firing of guns, then you're sitting here and you're lying to not only me, you're lying to every African American, every black person in the community, because we see it over and over and over. There was multiple, if you watch the video, there was multiple moments where if they wanted to, they could have tackled him, they could have grabbed him. You know, they could have done that. And why does it always have to get to a point where we see the guns firing and his family is there, the kids are there, it's in broad daylight. I know people get tired of hearing me say it, but we are scared as black people in America. Black men, black women, black kids, we are terrified because you don't know. You have no idea. You have no idea how that cop that day left the house.
You know, he ended up saying, as he closed out his statement, he says, we don't even know if that cop woke up that day thinking maybe I'll go shoot someone or maybe I'll go harm a black person. This is idiotic now that we have the facts. And I was honest enough with you today to say, you, my listeners, to say, hey, you know what? I didn't know the facts last Thursday. Now I do. Here they are. I would love, it would be such a refreshing thing to see in our society for LeBron James to take to the microphones and say, you know what? I didn't know the facts. I'm wrong. The idea that, the police had numerous opportunities to tackle this guy, Jacob Blake. No, actually, they tried to numerous times. Jacob Blake had numerous opportunities to comply, to stop fighting. He chose not to. He chose to intentionally fight off the officers, grab one in a headlock. The concept Jake, what you just heard LeBron James say is disconnected from the facts on the scene, the facts that you could see if you watch all the video now available and have all the information now available. But I want to tell you why I called him a useful idiot. And I don't like that term. I'm feeling like kind of mean even saying that. But that is this. What you're watching in this country, not just the protests about Jacob Blake, but the George Floyd protests, the violence around this country. We are being orchestrated. Our entire country is being orchestrated into and toward a revolution. The forces behind the riots, the destruction, the burning of buildings, the burning of cars, the theft, all of that. This is not organic uprising against injustice. It is orchestrated Marxist overthrow of this country. LeBron James, I don't think he's not one of those Marxists who really love to see the communists take over. He's not that at all. He's just a useful idiot enabling what the communists are doing in using race to try to bring about the Marxist revolution in this country, to manipulate the American people into such outrage over injustices, exaggerated, or in this case, completely, unjustified anger over what the police did. I mean, you can argue, okay, maybe they could have tried to one more time to tackle the guy one more time. But the facts in this case do not justify the conclusion that LeBron James is trying to tell America to come to. LeBron James is falling into the mantra, the manipulation of the communist movement in this country, and he's being played for a fool. I would love if he would have the integrity to come to the microphones and say, I was wrong about Jacob Blake. It'd be great. He could say, you know what? I still think there's too much police brutality in this country. I still think we have a problem with race in this country. I'd still like to see more improvement in police officers and police departments around this country. Fine, say that. But have the integrity to come to the microphone and correct yourself when you have led not just a handful of people, but millions of young Americans who look at LeBron James as King James, the man, the big star in basketball. Have the integrity, correct yourself when what he said last week truly may have resulted in more division, more outrage, unjustified in this country. Unjustified in this country. And what also happened in response to LeBron James and the whole incident with Jacob Blake was a bunch of not just NBA players refused to play, where they missed a Major League Baseball game, they had NHL, they had all sorts of the professional sports leagues in unity, in support, stand back and say, well, as long as this isn't corrected, we're not going to play either. There wasn't a brave owner of any of those teams, a brave leader in any of those teams to say, hey, wait a minute, guys, you got the facts wrong. This is crazy to be protesting over Jacob Blake. This does not fit with reality, and you're looking like fools. There's not one single leader in professional sports to say that, which unfortunately for professional sports is driving more and more Americans to say, why should we listen to them when they are essentially accusing all of America and certainly all police officers, painting all of America and all police with a broad brush? Why should we listen to them when we know America is a better place than LeBron James is claiming it is? And police, not perfect, but police are much better than what you're trying to hear, what you hear LeBron James trying to convince America that they are. And that, my very fine friends, is today's First Five.